Itachi Uchiha was for a period of time placed in the most ludicrous matches against the most powerful characters in videos like could Itachi actually beat Madara or could Itachi beat Jubito, and this led to the inevitable period of time following where Itachi was then considered to be garbage and barely scraping by in the top of the Akatsuki, with some people even believing that his partner Kisame is, well, simply stronger, leading me to finally capitalize on the chance of resetting the community where Itachi is rightfully and where he should actually be placed with a firm grasp of his power and narrative compared to characters he should more so rival like Obito and Pain, whilst offering a new insight into many statements and lore from guidebooks and the novels. So, just how strong is Itachi? The man who never once went all out in a fight, but is still in contention for the strongest man in the Akatsuki. However, what made this come to be? What did Itachi's rather unknown childhood actually look like that made him to be known as one of the strongest ninja to ever live? And the two Itachi novels give us a lot of insight on not only Itachi's character and reason for holding back in literally every fight, but also his truly impeccable, prodigious nature that made even Danzo hail him as the greatest academy graduate of all time, despite other shinobi like Minato and Kakashi, two of the greatest prodigies ever to pass through it just prior to him, where Itachi would then go on to exceed the expectations of everyone around him, taking the academy exam test that was considered to be easy by Itachi's own standards, where he would also complete it in the fastest time and score ever, just behind Minato. And this is after Danzo wanted to make Itachi take this at the point he did because he was going on missions with his teammates and jonin supervisors that was simply pointless due to how inferior they were to him. And this is just really consistent for Itachi's already beyond Chunin level power, as only when 5 years old during the Nine Tails attack there was a boulder with rubble flying off in the direction of his jonin mother Mikoto, where he would instantly toss Sasuke and channel chakra into his fist to the point of blue chakra flames erupting, similarly to how Sakura and Tsunade do later in the series, where Itachi then shattered this boulder into pieces while his jonin mother was amazed at Itachi's instantaneous action with saucer-like eyes. So when considering this, Itachi being above even his own jonin supervisors, scoring the second highest exam scores ever easily, and him even completing the Forest of Death in the fastest time ever, despite being alone, all just become consistent. I've heard some people take Minato's written exam scores and imply it's simply much more impressive than Itachi's. However, this was done easily by Itachi, and he had a much faster Forest of Death time, despite being at an active disadvantage. So, what's more impressive, taking a literary test on a subject or doing that subject in combat? Moreover though, it certainly doesn't stop there for Itachi, as the anime profile guide state that Itachi's abilities around the age of 12 were outstanding compared to the Uchiha clan, which is also stated in that exact same guide to be the strongest clan in all of Konoha, to such an extent that it says the Uchiha clan is synonymous with societal peace for them. A definition for outstanding being exceptionally good or superior, which would also just align with Itachi's fireball being able to reach a size that only Fugaku, his father, and Shisui could replicate. And the fireball jutsu, for those who don't know, is an indispensable skill for the Uchiha clan to such a degree that it's actually a jutsu required to make them a full-fledged shinobi. And Itachi's is at the peak of the clan, where he would later be called outstanding in comparison to, meaning that prior to even obtaining his Mangekyo Sharingan, Itachi was not only at the peak of Konoha, but the world. This is why when people mention Itachi's fight against Kakashi in part 1 as a defeater to Itachi's true power, it's quite clear that Itachi's power was only displayed in fractional pieces at best, which is something pointed out by Kakashi after Asuma couldn't believe that Itachi was as good as he was, where Kakashi noted that no, he's actually even better. He hasn't even begun to show his true strength. And well, to put this into perspective, Itachi literally was just previously weaving signs beyond even Kakashi's Sharingan perception, which is likely just really consistent and not even fully indicative of Itachi's true power, seeing as a much younger Itachi is stated by a much stronger Orochimaru than that Itachi is, and only his 3 Tomoe statement, I mind you, is simply stronger than himself. This would be the same Orochimaru who stated to not only be practically the same strength as the Hokage whilst posed as the Kazekage, but also just relative to Hiruzen and their battle, being called even equals with both of their respective mental afflictions. And this Hiruzen is also just stronger than Kakashi by virtue of being Hokage, and him being stated to stand at the peak of the shinobi world, or the top of the shinobi world, hence to why Orochimaru was able to impose so much fear into Kakashi that he might preemptively activate his Chidori before lifting his Sharingan eye, which is something he still has a vision of his head simply getting chopped off in that moment. However, when Orochimaru was opposed by a much weaker Itachi, he was instantly frozen under a 3 Tomoe Genjutsu where Itachi spared him, chopping off only his hand, forcing him to leave the Akatsuki out of a deep feeling of inferiority, according to the Akatsuki novel. Progressing back to the Kakashi fight, you now understand why Asuma, Guy, and Kurenai were so shocked at a power Kakashi, the strongest Jonin, knew to be nothing compared to his true power, where Itachi would then humiliate him by placing him in the Tsukiyomi to both convince the squad that he was going all out and to remind Danzo and the elders that he was alive and very much a threat. Though Itachi's torture on Kakashi looks brutal, in which, well, it is, it's still kind of generous from Itachi, since he actually let Kakashi maintain consciousness through and even resist the Tsukiyomi, as it's implied that he was able to remove a kunai from his left foot if you actually zoom in, which it also is implied by Kakashi when he questions Itachi's true reasons for not killing him, which is possible under the Tsukiyomi, as Itachi actually kills Izumi, his girlfriend, during the massacre with the Tsukiyomi, where he placed her in a genjutsu lasting a complete lifetime, where she married and grew old with Itachi, living out their full life, where upon releasing it, she died in the real world as well. So what Kakashi was hit with was certainly nowhere near Itachi's full capability with his genjutsu, which we can call back to upon later. Why did Itachi do this though? Kakashi was once his friend and Itachi never was truly evil, right? So why did he do this despite the pacifist nature laid out through Itachi's character after witnessing the Chains of War at the age of simply 4? And well, this is because though Itachi was never violent, he lived in a world he believed that required him to be an absolute force and by far the strongest ninja to impose peace unto all, giving us an insight into Itachi's extreme utilitarian ideals, which I think are best outlined through a dialogue of conversations with Danzo, who poses the question of if a ship with crew and all was out at sea, and he was also a leading member of such a ship, what would he do if one of the members became deathly sick and threatened the possibility of contaminating the other crew members? And Itachi soundly responded with basically he'd do what he had to do since the man would have died regardless. Though Itachi wouldn't want to violently end the life of the sick man either, he'd do it to guarantee the safety of more crew members. Well, if you haven't pieced it together, this is actually a parallel to Itachi's later decision in accepting the Uchiha massacre as a mission, as it's noted that a civil war would erupt and neighboring villages would capitalize on this by destroying the rest of his home village. So, even though they were his blood, his family, Itachi set out to coldly make the choice of killing them and doing what he needed to do to yield a much better result. This would be a concept in Itachi's character that would undoubtedly remain prevalent in Itachi's fighting style through the series, where he would actually just kind of hold back or be inhibited in every fight he ever participated in, doing only what was necessary and nothing more. Such as how he coldly placed Nimue, his Chunin exam's opponent who he fought with his eyes closed, kind of like Zenitsu from Demon Slayer, where Itachi then eventually woke him up and placed him in a terrifying genjutsu where he was left screaming repeatedly. And this is because that was Itachi's only option. Like with Kakashi here, Itachi's only option would be to hold back severely to avoid killing Konoha's strongest Jonin, to simply convince the elders of his presence. But this piece of Itachi's character would be something that led many fans to truly think that Itachi was going all out against Sasuke, Nagato, or Kabuto, despite it being made extremely clear against Hebi Sasuke that Itachi was holding back, such as how Zetsu questions after his death how it all unfolded, questioning why Itachi was coughing up blood. Why did Itachi not dodge the rigged shuriken attack? Then, when you reanalyze the fight in this context, you realize why did Itachi stare at that blade while it penetrated his leg, where he then dropped to his knee while Sasuke blasted out a fireball. Then Itachi clearly weaved it and even dodged Sasuke's faster Chidori charge whilst in mid-air. Rewinding the scene back further, just prior to the rigged shuriken scene, Itachi is shown matching every single one of Sasuke's shuriken throws, whilst also perception blitzing him and his Sharingan with hand signs for a clone. This implying that the weakest and sickest version of Itachi was a full perception blitz level above the strongest form of heavy Sasuke, that he had to actually slow down his pace later to convince Sasuke of an honest victory. Which, to put this in perspective, this Sasuke was implied by Naruto even after defeating Kakuzu to be stronger than himself, which would be consistent with how basically without any facial expressions at all, Sasuke perception blitzed both Naruto and Sakura, who was able to fight Sasori, who participated in the death of two Kazekages, one of which was the strongest Kazekage ever, whose Iron Sand was more feared than even Shikaku. Even Tsunade believed that Sasuke was using forbidden sauce to amplify his power to such a level. And then Itachi, whilst deathly sick and nearly blind, was perception blitzing this Sasuke and could have killed Sasuke at virtually any point if he wanted to, as implied by Obito, except Itachi simply never did. So though what he did do was radically spam his Mangekyo abilities to the point of blindness from their already impaired state through multiple Genjutsu clashes with Sasuke using the Tsukiyomi whilst holding back, like with Kakashi, and his Amaterasu shots, which in determining the amount of shots he actually used in this deathly sick state is more complicated than you might imagine. However, there are two interpretations, and I'll give you both because both are pretty impressive for Itachi's usage of it. The first shot of Amaterasu is against Sasuke's fireball, which totally encompassed it. The next ones, though, all come from the next 3 pages, so let me explain the interpretations that lead to either 5 or 2 Amaterasu. The way to interpret this as 5 is counting the Amaterasu like this: 2, 3, and 4 all misfire, fly off the roof, and the 5th is the one he fires back up towards Sasuke and eventually catches his curse mark wing, making 5 Amaterasu. However, I think asserting it as 2 total Amaterasu is actually more accurate, yet just as impressive, weirdly enough. So, notice after shot 1, Itachi's right eye closes. It then reopens and the center pupil dilates, implying a channel of chakra like with the Rinnegan, and scenes like this where it actually dilates and activates a sensory ability every time it does such, meaning that the case is similar for Itachi and his Mangekyo, likely being that there is something active in some amount of chakra allocation in the eye whilst it's dilated. He then intentionally misfires off the roof, and these 3 bursts that are all connected, implying that they are the same shot, which is also consistent with how Itachi's eye doesn't close. Then the next burst follows up the roof from a point close to the misfire's designation, where it then tracks Sasuke and catches the end of his wing. This would only be possible if the shot was almost dragged up the building after the misfire, which also explains why his pupil was dilated and why the eye was active during the entire sequence. So Itachi could unironically just drag shot an entire group of like 6 fighters in one go if he wanted or something, or he could just fire 5 more individually, whatever you want to say. And this would be the same Amaterasu stated by Zetsu to both be impossible to dodge, like Sasuke's strongest jutsu Kirin, but even greater in the fact that it's the strongest physical attack. And while many people neglect to mention Kirin, Itachi unironically tanked it and is likely in his ribcage as well. To size this up to you guys though, Sasuke, upon getting his ribcage, was getting busted up and cracked by the Raikage's taijutsu, and Itachi, while sick and blind in both eyes, tanked the ultimate lightning style jutsu that's potentially implied to go beyond Kakashi's Raikiri that pierced straight through Kakuzu's diamond morph that stayed to null virtually all physical attacks, meaning that Itachi's ribcage is more durable than that if you consider these factors, showing not only how impressive it is, but also why the databook's ludicrous remarks in reference to it and its spirit weapons are probably just accurate and more grounded than you initially think. The third databook in regards to Itachi Susanoo, and more importantly the spirit weapons, makes several remarks, like how it calls it a godlike technique that's only used by those who have achieved mastery beyond the Mangekyo Sharingan, a jutsu feared by those around him as the most powerful of the ocular jutsu. This would directly mean that every one of Pain's Rinnegan abilities displayed prior to chapter 402, as well, that's the furthest this databook covers, would be inferior to Itachi's guardian deity and its spirit weapons, which While this could become contentious if you're generous to pain with things like Shinra Tensei or Bansho Tenin, though those abilities haven't actually been used by this point, meaning that his full Susanoo capabilities scale above the Preta Path's absorption, the Animal Path's summons, and the Ashura Path's missile. And plus, if you push the statement a little further, you could also imply it's simply greater than Kakashi's unmastered long-range Kamui, and potentially even Itachi's other ocular jutsu like the strongest Genjutsu, the Tsukiyomi, and the strongest physical attack, the Amaterasu. These two abilities had KCM1 Naruto literally screaming at B to watch out, and that if he gets hit by either, it's all over. So yes, Itachi's Susanoo, and more importantly, his spirit weapons are stupidly powerful. The main reason for this would be in part to the spirit weapons, being the Totsuka blade and Yadamir, which lack even a physical form and are so mythical that most people question if they even exist. The former is stated to be a variant of the Kusanagi blade that is endowed with the power to plunge those it pierces into a world of drunken dreams. The blade itself is imbued with sealing jutsu. Then, the latter, being the Yadamir, is stated to be a spirit weapon without physical form with the power to change every one of its properties, allowing it to alter its attributes in accordance with the attributes of the oncoming attack, rendering that attack ineffective. The combination of these two forces forces the data book to state that the Susanoo boasts an absolutely perfect attack and defense because of its spirit weapons wielded in each hand, the 10-handed sword that can cut down any enemy in its right, and the Yadamir, a shield that can repel any attack. In the face of a god's power, any attack, whether from a material or astral body, ninjutsu or physical, lose their meaning, end quote. Meaning that at a bare minimum, every single attack prior to chapter 402 would be null. The second fan book also makes a note, which also covers further beyond that point, all the way at least to the first half of the Kage Summit, as noted by the publishing date, and the manga images inside the book. In regards to Itachi Susanoo, though, it actually states, quote, the fierce appearance of the god, as if announcing the end of a battle, has captured many hearts of the readers. The absolute ultimate defense. Though saying it only repels all ninjutsu prior to chapter 402 through the more concrete third databook section is likely just a lowball still, considering how it actually describes the method of how it repels attacks, which wouldn't arbitrarily formatively be different in relation to the attacks following chapter 402, potentially demonstrating how the Susanoo would remain an invincible force through all of the narrative until things like truth-seeking orbs, which do virtually the same thing, come about. This would potentially imply that it's capable of nulling Sasuke's Amaterasu, which boasts a heat high enough for him to be confident in burning the entire 10 tails, which would obviously be far greater than the 8 tails that can tank its own multi-continental Biju bombs, and even Kurama, who could possibly produce enough energy to sear the entire crust of the planet, and potentially even destroy it. However, though this is a higher ball interpretation, I just want to put it into perspective just how insane the Susanoo actually is. Though, with this ridiculous praise, it never seems to get its complete chance to shine. However, like the Susanoo, Itachi's physical power and ability never did either. And the problem with that is that many people then assume that it doesn't exist. Then they only believe because of their lack of understanding of Itachi's showings and reason for either being suppressed or holding back in the manner he did, and his deathly sickness never helped this because, well, Itachi was literally blind and having a heart attack where he still displayed power far beyond the Sannin through him totally blitzing and beating up Orochimaru's 8-headed Hydra that's compared to a dragon god that's also stated to surpass Orochimaru himself, making the Hydra the largest and most powerful of every snake. Then, when Itachi actually goes all out to slice him up and seal him, he is coughing up blood and is blind, as visualized by his cataracts were so impaired that they were actually preventing accumulation of protein along the islands, giving off this whitened effect and telling us, the reader, that Itachi was blind. To put this into perspective, both Jiraiya and Orochimaru are very close in power, but Orochimaru was called the strongest Sannin several times and even states it's no contest between who's more powerful between him and Jiraiya. Then, upon entering their above the Sannin level forms, being Sage Mode and the Hydra, Jiraiya is able to keep up with the Paths of Pain at full power one-on-one, and even be on the road to victory when in such a situation, as noted by the weekly release chapter synopsis statement, whereas Orochimaru was blitzed multiple times per panel and was blitzed and sealed by Itachi in his weakest state ever while coughing up blood and blind. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions, but maybe the data book's remarks stating that even in the face of a god's power, all attacks are made meaningless, it might have just been talking about the invincible god, Pain, but hey, I digress. However, like many others, I myself noticed how Itachi wasn't always like this. Firstly, think back to the beginning of Shippuden, where Itachi with just 30% of his chakra and no Mangekyo, which gives him more chakra, is able to use 2 genjutsu clones, a fireball jutsu, with the anime having an even higher interpretation with several more jutsu like his Phoenix Flower jutsu that even hurt Perfect Jinchuriki Killer B in the war arc, all with him still piecing up Kakashi and having 30% of his chakra, which is pretty consistent and gets more impressive as well when going back a little further to part 1, where Itachi used basic genjutsu, water bullets, clones, Tsukiyomi twice, and Amaterasu without any sweat or scuff mark whatsoever, with Kisame still implying that they should have stayed and fought Jiraiya with his power, talking about Itachi's Mangekyo. Which, this is another point that's used for people who maybe unknowingly miss some context, but yes, Itachi could have stayed and would have obviously murdered Jiraiya. Kisame believes this as well, questioning why they retreat with his power, which is in reference to Itachi's Mangekyo, implying that Kisame believed Itachi could have beaten Jiraiya and Itachi could have used more Mangekyo techniques and would have been fine, which is probably just consistent with how Orochimaru says a weaker 3-Tomoe Itachi is stronger than himself, who states it's no contest between him and Jiraiya. So what happened? How did Itachi go from having ridiculous showings for stamina and usage of his abilities whilst holding back to then having a heart attack and being blind in the middle of a fight? And what does this true power actually look like if he was going all out during that time in the series? When, well, it comes down to how you interpret his illness, and while you can semantically dive into this particularities of what could it actually be in real life medical conditions, being things like microscopic polyangiitis or HIV. However, the Sasuke Jin Raiden novel points to Itachi's illness and the medicine for it being so potent that it actually destroyed all the equilibrium, which is essentially the body's ability to maintain a sense of homeostasis, though Reishi, the character who made Itachi's eye drops, which could potentially be the reason for Itachi's illness, but I digress. The novel never points to Itachi's direct illness, but Reishi does mention that Itachi came and bought the eye drops every year or so, and states, quote, he added that he would want to live for another while in order to carry out some things. After that, he wouldn't care about anything anymore. For this reason, I prepared a stronger medicine for him, but with stronger side effects. It provoked a searing pain to the lungs and contaminated the blood of the one who made use of it. However, I would understand if you wouldn't consider this novel as canon, as it simply covers the period where Sasuke transitions to Taka from Hebi, and like the other novels, it's only drawn and supervised by Kishimoto, not written, and some of the translations can be rough, though, like the justification of his real-world medical diagnosis, it's not fully necessary for this scaling. However, both do offer good explanations for those who want them. However, we do still know that both interpretations work and could align with how Itachi stands out in the rain in an effort to get sick, potentially. However, again, I just say that on the basis that Itachi's stamina was marginally better a few months prior, I would argue that Itachi had to make an effort to worsen it in his planning for his death to Sasuke to come. This would mean that when reanimated, Itachi was simply reanimated at a place prior to his fight with Sasuke, where he was in a much better condition, seeing as, well, he's not blind and coughing up blood, despite being shown to have some during his Amaterasu attack. However, the common counter to this is, well, there's no way Itachi could scale to his Edo form because, well, his feats are too good. This is completely erroneous. Like, why? Itachi never actually went all out in any fight whilst alive, but has the lore to support such a level, except he just never had the incentive or chance to display it. And there's no reason for Edo Itachi not to be a version of alive Itachi, revived, seeing as every Edo Tensei, except Madara, who was worked on by Kabuto, every other one wasn't. Hiruzen's Edo Tensei literally copied the amount of dead pigment cells on his face to give him the old man beard, along with it also copying the exact amount of wrinkles he had during his battle with Orochimaru. Nagato's Edo Tensei body also fully copied his real bodily form whilst alive, where he couldn't even walk. So with the Rinnegan being hypothesized by Kabuto to be a higher evolution of the Sharingan, there quite literally is not a single reason, and it would in fact be counterproductive if Kabuto enhanced Itachi's body and not Nagato's, whose body was so damaged he couldn't walk. With that, Kabuto doesn't even know about Itachi's niche arsenal and believes that he had the tracking ability, when Itachi states, well, that was Nagato. So So it's not like Kabuto is aware of Itachi in the more minute sense, and certainly in the sense that he fully changed his body due to him recovering it at the end of the Sasuke fight, as that would simply not only contradict Kabuto, but the entire fundamental replicative aspect of the Edo Tensei, and simply has no basis for the idea other than something similar to an appeal to absurdity. However, what is grounded in the narrative is Itachi being reanimated at an earlier point due to his state whilst revived, which actually might hold more substance, as we note a little later that Itachi's command under the Kodo Amatsu Kami Crow is to simply protect the leaf, which is done through an absolute optimal method. And what I mean is Itachi only ever evolves to a higher state of power when the situation absolutely calls for it, and it only evolves to the lowest level capable of performing said task. With this being said, when Itachi slices Nagato's hand, he enters into the V3 Susanoo state and then lowers it to bomb the Chibaku Tensei with the Yasuke beads, but when needing to seal Nagato, Itachi then evolves all the way to a V4 complete Susanoo to gain access to a Totsuka blade and Yadamir, implying that those aren't able to be used prior. Yet when alive in the Sasuke fight, though he was blind and much weaker, his Susanoo mastery was greater, yielding him the ability to actually use these spirit weapons in the V2 or V3 state, potentially implying that Itachi could have been reanimated from a less experienced point where he didn't hold such mastery, meaning that I see no reason as to why Itachi shouldn't feasibly scale to his Edo Tensei feats, or at least he just should be near them when going all out whilst alive. If you're going to be really conservative, which is fine, just don't be disingenuous and say, there's no way. Whilst revived, Itachi was casually shown parrying off KCM1 Naruto in just his 3 Tomoe Sharingan, and while some people tried to write this encounter off as both were engaging in conversation and were suppressed, Itachi still completely weaves B's surprise attack so quickly that he completely does 3 full leaps before B actually even finishes his initial attack completely, where B then engages in his 8-sword style that's actually meant to literally counter the precognitive abilities of the Sharingan as shown against Sasuke, where Itachi was so far above him that he was able to parry off over 10 different strikes without an actual sword of his own, which he would then switch sides and blitz the animal path and later cripple Nagato, with the Amaterasu acting under his command from the Kodo Amatsu Kami Crow, commanding him to protect Konoha, which is important as well, we noted that earlier, as Itachi remains suppressed the entire fight in some way or another, and only gets less suppressed when the situation calls for it, such as when Itachi needed to save both Naruto and B from Amp Nagato, who blitzed and overpowered both, where Itachi only used his skeletal variant where he then blitzed and overpowered Nagato's hold, ripping his arm and the chameleon's tongue straight off, which he would also go on to just hold Naruto and B, who were trying to escape as shown by the tension lines around them, showing just how monstrous Itachi was, which would be more prominent when he lowered the Susanoo evolution to then bomb the Chibaku Tensei alongside Naruto and B, which some people will use to say, well, it took 3 people, meaning one couldn't do it, which just simply isn't true. They completely vaporized the Chibaku Tensei, which would require way more force and energy to do than simply blowing it up, but even with that lowball, Itachi still destroyed over 33% of the Chibaku Tensei, and considering Itachi calls this his strongest attack, it may pose an equal or similar threat to the Amaterasu, which incinerates the replicating dog that was tanking Naruto's Rasen Shuriken, implying that they could even be stronger than the Rasen Shuriken in terms of sheer force using this, and either way, Itachi can just use another bead, but it does still kind of lose its precise benefit, but even that, it's not like Pain whilst alive is ever going to be able to hold up the Chibaku Tensei if this amount of it was destroyed, seeing as the V2 Eight Tails of Naruto was breaking rocks and forced it to fall, but I digress. Then the Susanoo evolved for some arbitrary reason to steal Nagato, unless again you subscribe to my mastery argument previously, meaning that whilst alive, Itachi could certainly scale to not only his Edo feats during this fight, but more importantly, his final send-off battle alongside his brother, who just recently obtained the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, where Itachi was still shown outpacing him through most of the battle, saving him and protecting him to take the damage himself, though Itachi couldn't go all out due to the need to place Kabuto under the Izanami to free the Edos, and Sasuke seems to think that they could have just killed him, which might be true if you consider how Itachi was able to pace around him at such a level to trap him in a loop, which this would be the same Kabuto is considered to be a rival to the strongest Jonin in Konoha in part 1, but now has Orochimaru's chakra, every sound 4 ability, and a Sage mode even greater than Naruto's to amplify this power, giving him ridiculous speed and sensory and Sage art ninjutsu like the White Rage technique. That is a jutsu using light and sound to knock out sight and hearing, a jutsu that forces the air to oscillate, paralyzing all senses and freezing you in place. However, Itachi was able to fully form the Susanoo hand and reach over to protect Sasuke whilst taking all the damage himself, showing just how impressive the amount of situations that the Susanoo could actually be utilized within. Fighting alongside Sasuke, he would finally be recognized by Itachi as an equal, where he would then later surpass him, which would also fit very nicely with how many times Danzo implies that a peak Kage Summit Sasuke is inferior to Itachi, comparing their Amaterasu and Genjutsu that was so much weaker than Itachi's Tsukiyomi that it was considered to be a night and day difference, though now, after obtaining the EMS, he's able to equally clash Genjutsu with Tsukiyomi to break Itachi and himself out of Kabuto. So alive Itachi and certainly Edo Itachi scaling equally to EMS Sasuke, who then surpasses him, is really telling, as this Sasuke goes on to have 6 pseudo-zetsu bodies removed from him to be vessels for the Hokage, which is pretty telling as Sasuke has surpassed Itachi by this point, yet previously just lost potentially some chakra though, and may actually get amped through his conversation with the Hokage, which opens a few areas of interpretation for this Sasuke, as he would then go on to combo attack and outperform Master KCM1 or KCM 1.5 Naruto, where he then tells him to basically go all out and he'll match him, instead pressing this Naruto to think Sasuke is wanting a competition. This would be the same Naruto who over 10 chapters prior was able to not only protect the entire Shinobi Alliance with his chakra, but also react to both Madara and Obito's combined fire style jutsu, coupled with Rinnegan Obito's surprise attack from behind, which Naruto is actually able to dodge, when this same Obito was able to fully react and, dare I say, outpace KCM2 Naruto earlier, showing just how powerful this Naruto has become despite being in a lesser form of KCM, and Sasuke would hence be close to this. And whilst this Sasuke is stronger than Itachi by some degree, it all kind of just goes along with Itachi's other showings in Edo, and it could at least still verify just where Itachi should scale to whilst alive without his illness, and why Obito's highly praised remarks of him might not even be inconsistent. Earlier into Itachi's childhood, Itachi would first encounter the masked man we know to be Obito, as he would cast a wide-scale genjutsu, knocking out several jonin and daimyo guards, though Itachi, at the age of 7, and his genjutsu specialist teammate would remain unscathed despite Itachi not even having a Sharingan by this point. Tenma would foolishly charge at Obito, where Obito would brutally dismantle and murder him in front of Itachi, utilizing his passive Kamui to catch Tenma, leaving Itachi utterly frozen by Obito's wordless pressure, as Itachi was simply trying to process the phenomenon of the man's body. However, like I mentioned at the beginning, Itachi would then grow exponentially stronger to a point that he would actually stand among the strongest ninja in the world at the age of only 12, where he was already an Anbu captain at only 2 years after passing the Chunin exams, by the way, due to how he swore to become the strongest ninja ever as his goal. Though, upon seeing Obito, the man he also swore to surpass in the Uchiha basement, he would also just notice him and be aware of how Obito was utilizing Kamui to weave certain cameras, where they then would exit out to a path lined by cedar trees under a full moon, with the road to Sunegakure being in sight, setting the exact same scene from the manga for Itachi, who just cut through Obito's arrogant attitude with forcefulness to then give Obito the ultimatum of, well, I'll help you get revenge on the Uchiha clan, and in exchange, you don't lay a hand on the village or Sasuke Uchiha. And if I refuse, to which Itachi then replied, if you were to refuse this request, you and I are enemies. And Obito asked if Itachi could kill him, and Itachi rebuttals with, it's not a matter of if I can or not, I will kill you. Where the two opponents then acknowledged each other as such. Obito, acknowledging Itachi kept his promise, one if broken, guaranteed his death by Itachi's hands by stating that Konoha's no longer off limits now that Itachi's dead, meaning that Itachi and his promise to kill Obito kept him from reaching his life goal, which may be consistent for why Obito was scared in such a way, as he did note after the Amaterasu surprise attack that if Itachi knew everything about him, he'd be dead, implying that via unknown means a full power Itachi could kill Obito in an ambiguous way. The same Obito is implied by Minato to be way stronger than even Pain, who just dominated the entire Leaf Village at once, which might not be inconsistent for Itachi to do as well, seeing as the Anbu mission reports in the anime profile guides mentioned that they were so worried about what Orochimaru was going to do. Was he going to assassinate the Hokage, destroy the entire village, which shouldn't be impossible for Itachi, though he does have a 2.5 in stamina for the data books, but these stats are of course not externally comparable, but rather individualistic methods of showing progressions and strong points, and hence it could just mean that Itachi's other stats are just so great and his stamina is just okay, just his other abilities are pretty crazy, which could then just take down the entire Leaf entirely, but that's somewhat tangential. Other medians like movies and games also imply that Itachi was rivaling and at least struck fear into Obito, like how in the Naruto Storm Generations game, Obito states that Itachi had no worthy opponents. However, all these get you one line of consistency for Itachi at full power being strong enough to kill Obito in some ambiguous way. Maybe, once again, you believe the camera zooming in on Itachi's left eye here is indicative of Tsukiyomi being the non-physical attack that he was going to utilize to kill Obito, which I think is interesting, seeing as Obito has one of, if not the most adept base Sharingan we've ever seen. However, could it resist the Tsukiyomi that actually has a rather in-depth section in the second data book? Well, allow me to read it out to kind of understand why it's so powerful, but also why it works in the way it does in the novels. Quote, amidst the insight and hypnosis possessed by the Sharingan is a supreme genjutsu, born from the aforementioned hypnosis, Tsukiyomi. Originally, people on the face of the earth live bound by limitations like time, gravity, and space, and how people exert their abilities within those restrictions is what separates the victors from the vanquished. But in the mental world where the caster drags their opponent in, the Tsukiyomi Jutsu gives them control over those very limitations. Namely, this means inside the genjutsu, the physical world's common sense is completely irrelevant and opposing the caster is impossible. Somebody caught into the Tsukiyomi finds themselves in a strange world of infinity, their fate entirely lying into the caster's hands. Sometime they will undergo the torments of hell, and some other time they will repeatedly be shown a horrendous, hellish picture of agony and mayhem, with no idea when either of those will end. As a result, the poor prisoner can only wait until the collapse of their psyche. Even a body made of iron or the speed of light are powerless before this jutsu, which is the reason why it's feared as the most powerful. The only thing the databook notes can defend against this deadly genjutsu would be a Sharingan. However, you could still potentially imply that considering the level of Obito's Sharingan, it just simply wouldn't work. However, it still might be able to if you consider a few things from the novels, like where Itachi places thousands, possibly tens of, nanobugs from the Aburame clan under the Tsukiyomi, which, like perfect Jinchuriki, is supposed to be impossible. However, due to its ridiculous speed, it overcomes these limitations in a picosecond, where Itachi can force you to live an entire lifetime to fully fry your brain and psyche in the physical world as well. Though, I could completely understand if you don't think this is Itachi's method of killing Obito, as I think, considering his sheer speed and power combined with his guardian deity that possesses non-physical, ethereal, weightless weapons like the Totsuka Blade and Yadamir, those are entirely more plausible and potentially just likely for what Itachi would use to kill Obito in the way Obito is thinking. Which leads me into our final point, which I'll leave up to your guys' interpretation, and it's Itachi supposedly being called the strongest man in the Akatsuki by the weekly released chapter synopsis statement of chapter 364, where Pain just accepted the mission to hunt Naruto, and Itachi shows up in pursuit of Naruto in the next chapter. Both of these align with the statement, quote, next time, the strongest man in the Akatsuki pursues Naruto. Many fans try to then debunk this statement by stating that, well, the next chapter synopsis statement says, Itachi, sheer coincidence leads Naruto to an unexpected enemy. However, it's kind of funny because if you actually pay attention to the punctuation, you'll notice this isn't saying Itachi showed up out of nowhere and wasn't pursuing Naruto, seeing as it states Itachi, then punctuates and says sheer coincidence leads Naruto, meaning Naruto, the subject, is being led by coincidence, not Itachi. So, Itachi was still actively pursuing Naruto like Pain. However, Which do you guys think this statement is talking about? Do you guys think it's referencing pain because Itachi's not technically a member, or do you think Itachi was the strongest all along? I mean, Sakura does state that Itachi was Naruto's greatest enemy, so maybe, but that's all I've got. What do you guys think? Do you guys still believe that Itachi was always portrayed to be ridiculously strong and was just overhyped by the fandom for some time? Or did I change your mind? Or do you still believe that he's sub-Kisame level, even though Itachi actually fought relative to him whilst sick prior to fighting Sasuke, according to the games, and only his 3 Tomoe Sharingan, and is actually so much stronger than Kisame that his aura suppresses Kisame's power, according to the Akatsuki novel? But maybe you're like me and have always wondered more about Itachi's mysterious wind style that he's listed to use. You know, could bro just amplify his fire style that's already stated to be the hottest of all fire style ninjutsu in the 10-year anniversary guide? Maybe, you know, that coupled with his exploding clones and light speed water bullets where Itachi can then overwhelm the opponent and catch him in genjutsu or some crazy combo, whatever. I don't care. I've been talking for a while. I really do hope you guys enjoyed. I've had a lot of fun making this, surprisingly, and believe I did a good job of establishing why Itachi is likely stronger than what he's been made out to be. And if you guys enjoyed, please consider liking or subscribing, as it would help out a ton. And as always, love you guys.